My name is Daniel Koritskis. I'm Director of AIDS Research at Brigham and Women's Hospital and Director of the Harvard AIDS Clinical Trials Unit, and also the Chairman of the Board of the HIV Medicine Association. On behalf of my co-chair, Laurie Garrett from the Council on Foreign Relations, and on behalf of the HIV Medicine Association and the Forum for HIV Collaborative Research, which together with the International AIDS Society are co-sponsoring this session, I'd like to welcome you to this morning's session.
So journalists, what can you do? You can check carefully who you are, who and what you're dealing with. Expose the lies, expose the twisted and perverse agendas, investigate the untold stories, uncover the truth. Some AIDS denialists work in bona fide universities. Some even teach students. If this happens in your neighborhood, ask the university authorities why they allow this and then write about it. There's a case in Chicago I know about. Science and health journalists should talk to the editorial desk and letters editors and vice versa to ensure that AIDS denialist letters are spotted on arrival and spiked, not published. Finally, for accurate information on HIV-AIDS, we've set up a new website called aidstruth.org, and there are many other organizations that give accurate information. Thanks very much. David Crow is a well-known AIDS denialist. He's the president of the Alberta Reappraising AIDS Society. It's probably him and his dog. Celia Farber needs the PR to sell her new book. Why did Peter Duesberg go off the rails? David Rasnick, as I said, used to work for Duesberg, now works for Matthias Rath. Roberto Geraldo served in 2000 as a member of the South African President's Commission.
Do the methodologies affect, bottom line, whatever tension may exist between the scientific community and the journalism community over how we do our jobs and what we decide is truth? John.
Well, I'm not sure that there's a lot of tension between professional scientists and professional journalists. I mean, I'm sure all the journalists in this room are covering this subject skillfully and honestly. I don't see tension there as a general rule. The journalists I was criticizing are the ones with biased and inappropriate agendas, not the mainstream. But you refer to public policy, and obviously public policy is influenced by the press, often rightly so. But if your public policy is flawed to start with, the press can be used to reinforce it, and government press offices can be used to plant stories or to manipulate and twist.
To what degree?
And science can be twisted in this way by government. And clearly in South Africa, as Nathan and Tamar have said very, very eloquently, government policy is twisted by perverse science. It's the same in the States with any of you who've read Chris Mooney's book, The Republican War on Science, or Michael Spector's article on a similar subject in The New Yorker a few months ago, will see how much the Bush administration twists science for political reasons on all sorts of issues. And the Democrats, I'm sure, have done the same thing in the past when they were in power. So, we're all vulnerable to being manipulated for different reasons, to promote agendas. And really, science is about truth. It's not really about an agenda. And journalists need to get at the underlying truth and report it faithfully and honestly.
Well, I'm going to...
There does need to be better dialogue and better access. And it is true that many scientists are poor communicators because we're not trained in it. We're trained to handle test tubes. And then there are multiple agendas. And university press offices and journal press offices have the goal of filling newspaper column inches, and they will put out stories that are in the best interests of the institution or the best interests of the journal, but are not necessarily important, and yet they're rammed down journalists' throats, and then the wood gets lost for the trees. If everything is a breakthrough, nothing's a breakthrough. So there needs to be more discipline, and again, like Laurie said, when pigs fly, these things will happen. There are many things that are put out in the press as AIDS stories that shouldn't really be there. They're, bread and butter, run-of-the-mill stuff, but they fill column inches, and I don't know any answer to that. And then there are sensationalist stories that are put out. The super virus that ate New York was the big thing of about 18 months ago. The final report on it was issued last week by the CDC and the MMWR, and absolutely got no column inches. So what's out there is big sensation, everyone in New York's going to die of this rapidly progressing virus. And the final outcome of the story was nothing. There's all sorts of bad stories out there and all sorts of good stories that don't get written, but it's an imperfect world and we're all responsible for that.
But what I want to ask, and what I want to propose is, should we be having a new ethic in journalism? Is it really the role of the media to challenge scientific consensus? Is it really the role of the media to say, well, the scientific consensus is wrong, the scientists have got it wrong? My personal view is that it's almost impossible for the general media, for the mainstream media, to be able to override the scientific consensus. The scientific consensus, if it's wrong, is going to be challenged by scientists in scientific journals. It's not the role of journalists to be challenging the scientific consensus. Does the media have the expertise to challenge the scientific consensus? In my view, it doesn't. And that's something I think that we should, when we have the floor discussion, be asking. Should we be seeing articles in the general media that challenge science? And in my view, it isn't the role of journalists to do that. I want to just do a plug for AIDS Truth as well, just as John did. And I hope other people who are presenting at the conference will also do a plug for AIDS Truth. Thanks.
Microphone 3.
Thanks very much. My name's Richard Horton and I work at a medical journal, so before I start criticizing anybody else, I should just say I plead guilty to all of the things you say that journals are responsible for. It is an imperfect world. We do our best and every week we make mistakes. However, I'd like to pick up on a couple of points, one from Nathan, one from Laurie. Nathan, you raised a very interesting question about, is ethics the problem? Should journalists refrain from challenging the scientific consensus? I think journalists should be challenging the scientific consensus every day. And I wish that journalists had challenged the scientific consensus on vials, on SSRIs being used in under 18s, and in all the instances of research which 18 months, 2 years or longer down the line turned out to be fraudulent. Because if it wasn't for journalists acting as a test of science that's published in journals such as the one I work for, The Lancet, then actually we don't have a balance of power in the way science gets reported. So please don't ask journalists not to challenge the scientific consensus. So that's the first thing. The second thing is Laurie's point. Why is it? And, back in the 90s, I remember spending time with Celia Farber and Peter Duisberg writing about what they were writing about for the New York Review of Books. And so your question at the very beginning, why are we still doing this, is the one that we actually haven't answered in this session. And we should be looking to an answer for that question. Why has it survived? I think part of the reason is we're too polite. When Manto Shabalala-Simang steps up onto a World Health Assembly panel in Geneva, she is listened to with deep respect. People don't walk off the panel. The Director General of WHO doesn't not invite her to that panel. He welcomes her. So part of the reason is we tolerate these dissenting views, we respect them, and we actually pay tribute to them because those people who embody them are still invited to events and given a world stage. The day we stop doing that is the day we start to at least push that off the mainstream agenda. But part of the problem is also our responsibility in this room. Science reporting. You're right, John, we do put press releases out every week from journals. And you know what? It amazes me that journalists write those press releases up almost word for word in the newspapers the following day. Because science is treated not like politics or trade or industry or any other department of state. Science is treated as truth, that anything that's published in a journal has to be right. That's wrong. We publish stuff that's wrong every day. And the idea that science is about truth on a daily basis is a complete flaw. So I worry about you calling your website AIDS Truth. That creates an expectation. It fuels a myth that science is delivering truth on a daily basis. And we know it doesn't. All of us who've done science know it doesn't. So please let's be humble. Please let's be modest. But please let's go out there and not be polite with people who we know are wrong. Thanks.
Nate first.
I agree with almost everything you said in that speech. I think that you said very many really good points. And I certainly don't want to see general scientific consensus go unchallenged on many things. Certainly on the, but on the fundamentals of whether HIV causes AIDS, I think it is so certain that that is a true statement that challenging it to create trouble really does harm people. And that's where I don't know if we disagree with each other, but I think we probably do agree with each other, but I certainly don't think that science is an ivory tower that should never be questioned. That I am completely in your camp with, for very many reasons.